Hello and welcome to a Firstpost PoV. After 12 days of fighting, Donald Trump surprisingly has announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. During this time, both countries fired non-stop missile barrages at each other. It's being told that Iran's military capabilities have been significantly degraded. And at one point, even the regime in Tehran and its viability was being brought into question. But now there is a ceasefire. There are some reports of it being violated, but Iran has denied them. So the question is, who will be happy with the ceasefire and who's most satisfied that the fighting is finally over? To try and answer these questions, let me introduce my guest, Mr. Tom Cooper, who's an aerial warfare analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Cooper, for speaking to us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Nice to be with you.
Yeah. We'll try to keep the politics out of it right now. Looking at it from a military perspective, considering how both sides had exhausted their arsenal and used a lot of their firepower against each other, who do you think would be most satisfied that the fighting is over? Would it be Iran or Israel?
I'm a little bit surprised by conclusions or commentary that the fighting is over, because from what I know, Iran has launched, actually Israel has continued its airstrikes through the night. Iran has offered to stop, provided Israel would stop at 4 o'clock in the morning. Israel did not stop. Iran launched another volley of ballistic missiles at Israel, hit it hard, particularly in Beersheba, but also Ramat David air base. And Israel is meanwhile announcing a retaliation for Iranian breach of ceasefire. Where there was no ceasefire, all that there was is an announcement in the social media by Donald Trump that there is a ceasefire. I mean, this is like anybody. If I now announce a ceasefire, it would be what the same. So therefore, as far as I can say, there is no end of fighting. As for who is going to be satisfied with what, that is hard to gauge, because Israel was meanwhile almost desperate to stop this fighting, which Israel has started. Iranians, on the contrary, could have continued for quite a long while longer. The damage caused by Israeli airstrike is widespread, but there is no conclusive evidence that this is decisive. And the similar in the case of Iranian airstrikes. Yes, they have caused lots of damage to Israel, but there is no conclusive evidence that it is decisive. It is just causing, just under apostrophes, causing ever more damage to Israel. So who is going to be happy or satisfied there, I don't know right now.
Interesting point you raised there. You say that Israel would like to see this fighting end quicker than Iran. I'm wondering why you would say that. Is it because they're low on interceptors needed to defend against the Iranian missile barrage? Is it because perhaps the damage that is being caused to Israeli cities is turning the public opinion against the Israeli regime? Is it because the Americans are not as enthusiastic to support this war? Why would you think the Israelis would be more happy to see this war end? And we'll speak from now on as if the war has not ended, since you are saying that the ceasefire is being violated by both sides. Why would you think Israel is not happy with continuing this war?
Principally because Israelis expected a quick demolition or destruction, assassination, however you want to call it, of the Iranian political and military leadership. They have managed to knock out most of, or to assassinate most of top Iranian military commanders, but Iranian military command has recovered in a matter of 2 or 3 hours. Then they have expected to quickly destroy the Iranian capability to retaliate, to strike on Israel with ballistic missiles. They have hit lots of bases, but most of these were empty because the units operating ballistic missiles went underground, and Israel has proven unable to destroy them there under the ground in their protective facilities. Then Israel has expected to establish superiority over Western Iran, so to make it unable for Iran to strike back. And it turned out it cannot do even that. Then Iran hit back, initially in one fashion, later on in different fashion. It has proven capable of not constantly, not reliably, but nevertheless striking Israel, causing massive amounts of material damage, causing losses to Israeli armed forces, not only to less so to civilian population, because this is not really the target of Iranian ballistic missile strikes. So therefore, whatever Israel has planned to do in this war didn't work. And it was no quick and clean operation, but it goes on and on and on and on, and Iran is constantly proving itself capable of hitting back. So that means things are not working the way Israelis have planned them to work. They might be claiming something else, but essentially they are not working the way they have planned them to do. There is also no hope of some kind of regime change. Iranian opposition is not in a position to do something serious against the regime. The regime is shaken, no doubt about this. We can see this alone from the fact that Khamenei is forced to hide all the time because Mossad is constantly attempting to assassinate him. Therefore, this is causing even some kind of communication troubles between Khamenei and the National Security Council in Tehran, and therefore all the top commanders of armed forces. No doubt about this either. But again, in grand total, Israel is not as successful as it is claiming it is, and therefore there is perhaps no public demand yet or whatever, but definitely a wish to end the fighting. But now the problem is this: as long as Israel continues bombing Iran, Iranians are going to continue striking back. So therefore, what is actually necessary for a ceasefire is, or a working ceasefire, is for Israel to stop striking Iran. Unless this happens, Iranians are going to continue striking back. That is as simple as that.
Where do you think Israel went wrong in its calculations? Because you clearly seem to be suggesting that they underestimated the strength of the Iranian military to respond and to recuperate after that initial strike on Friday. Did they underestimate the missile barrages and the stockpile that the Iranians had? Did they underestimate the backups they had in place in case the top leadership was wiped out? Where did Israel go wrong in its calculations from what you've seen?
Well, almost everywhere. The primary difference to what Israel is doing for already 50 years, since 1973, is that in Iran it's fighting a nation state and not some under apostrophes paramilitary organization or terrorist organization, or call them whatever you like. But it has launched an aggression on a nation state with a huge armed force. And I'm talking here about an armed force which was custom tailored for this kind of a war, which was preparing for this kind of a war for nearly 30 years meanwhile. That this armed force is not particularly well led, that it is not equipped with some kind of super high-tech weaponry is a different topic. But essentially, Israelis have expected to defeat this armed force in a matter of few days. Almost the way they have defeated, for example, Hezbollah's capability to strike with long-range ballistic missiles at Israel in a matter of 2 or 3, perhaps 4 days, and that's it. But Iran is huge. Iran is a huge country territorially. It's 3 times the size of Ukraine, just for example. Therefore, Israelis have no ability to permanently track developments, deployment of Iranian armed forces, just for example. They were heavily dependent on this, on supply of US intelligence. But it was not enough. Iran remains capable of striking back at Israel, and this is what is, of course, causing lots of frustration in Israel. They cannot make them stop on their own. So they have to continue striking at, under apostrophes, continue striking at Iran, which in turn is giving Iran the reason to strike back at Israel. And so this is a vicious circle. And now we are going to see whether anybody there can convince Israel to stop this.
A lot of people have been talking about the numbers on both sides, not the military numbers, but specifically the missiles and the interceptors, that Iran has the biggest missile stockpile in the region, while Israel, of course, has an air defense system that is supported by the United States with multiple layers. A lot of experts seem to be saying that this war will ultimately, if it drags on, depends on whose stockpile lasts longer. From what you've seen in the last 12 days, what is the status of the stockpile on the Iranian side and the status of the interceptors on the Israeli side, and who holds the edge there?
Well, there are very different estimates for the number of Iranian ballistic missiles, and now I'm talking just about ballistic missiles capable of reaching Israel, because Iran additionally has a separate arsenal of shorter-ranged missiles capable of reaching US bases in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and meanwhile in Saudi Arabia as well. So in the case of the stockpile of missiles capable of reaching Israel, there are very different estimates as well, between 2,000, 3,000, some are talking even about 30,000 ballistic missiles. As far as is known, Iran has so far fired some 550, perhaps up to 600 ballistic missiles at Israel. At the current rate it is firing them, it could probably go for another 3 months. That is my estimate. In regards of Israeli capability to defend itself, this is constantly decreasing. Why? Because, and this is very obvious, because anti-ballistic missiles or surface-to-air missiles used by Israel to protect itself from Iranian retaliation are extremely expensive. Whether they are of Israeli origin, in which case they are even more expensive than the American, or if they are of American origin. That means the Americans have, for example, deployed 5 guided missile destroyers off the coast of Israel, and these are shooting at incoming Iranian ballistic missiles as well. Not only the Israeli defenses are doing so. So this means this is very expensive for the United States as well. And there are always limits. You have to load the number of missiles. You can load the number of missiles on a guided missile destroyer of the US Navy, but once it has spent them, it has to move away, go back to Rota in Spain, or if there are any at Crete, then it goes to Suda Bay at Crete in Greece and reloads its weaponry, and then it takes another several hours to return to the coast of Israel. So this is extremely expensive operation for the Americans and for the Israelis, and they cannot sustain this tempo of operations for any durable period of time. We have seen it essentially after 1 week. They were already so short on missile defenses that they have started using Iron Dome surface-to-air missiles, which are absolutely unsuitable for intercepting heavy Iranian ballistic missiles. So yes, sure, they have scored 1 hit, no doubt about this, but in grand total they are not sufficient for the task on hand. So in terms of war of attrition, even if supported, wholeheartedly supported by United States, Israel was on the losing side in this regards. But this does not mean that it is defeated. On the contrary, nor does it mean that Iran can now claim some kind of a victory. Iranians have it easier in total terms because they are the weaker side, the obviously, side which does not have such capabilities like Israel and United States combined. They cannot win this war in military terms. What they can do is survive and continue hitting back, and this is what they are doing.
You mentioned the Iranian missiles and the sort of attack they have launched on Israel. From the pictures that you've seen, and perhaps pictures of the residue of the missiles and things like that, what sort of missiles has Iran predominantly used to strike Israel? Are these their most advanced and biggest missiles, or have they kept them for perhaps a more dire scenario? For example, we saw yesterday that it was after the United States bombed Iran that they fired the Khorramshahr 4 missile, which is said to be their biggest. So what sort of missiles from their arsenal has Iran used so far?
Iran principally has 3 generations of ballistic missiles capable of reaching Israel. This is the first generation from the early 2000s. Has meanwhile been largely upgraded to the second generation, which are more precise, have multiple re-entry vehicles, have a range of up to 1,300, 1,500 kilometers, which means they are capable of striking Israel from positions deeper inside Iran, where Israelis have a bigger problem with finding and reaching them. And then there is the third generation, which is consisting of even heavier weaponry, missiles with a range of 2,000 kilometers, which means Iranians can fire from central or eastern Iran at Israel, where they are absolutely outside of the reach of Israelis. These weapons are also heavier. They have warheads of between 1,000 and 2,000 kilogram. Khorramshahr, you have mentioned Khorramshahr, for example, has a 2,000 kilogram warhead, or alternatively, it has a cluster bomb warhead, which means while falling down back to the earth, the warhead or its weapons compartment falls apart and distributes some 20 or 30 different warheads, which are then hitting a larger area, something like 8,000 meters in diameter. But we have also seen more the latest Iranian ballistic missiles in deployment, which have hypersonic re-entry vehicles. And what the Iranians are doing is to combine all of this weaponry. They are not shooting just one type of missiles at Israel, but very different ballistic missiles. They are shooting, for example, EMAD, which has a range of 2,000 kilometers from eastern Iran on Israel. They are flying along different trajectory than the short-range missiles fired from western Iran, making things more complex for Israeli air defenses. And unsurprisingly, a significant number of such warheads are striking Israel. Israel then responds with social media statements like, we are shooting down 95% of everything coming our way, which is obviously, when you calculate the actual number of impacts and what have the Iranians fired, it's obviously not true. But okay, let's give them their fun. It's fine for them. But the point is this: through combination of different types of missiles, the Iranians are keeping Israeli air defenses under pressure, and these air defenses are ever more reliable on weaponry which is less capable, and ever more reliable on US support. And this is what is not positive from Israeli point of view. On the contrary, this is something absolutely unexpected for them.
Right. Let's talk about what happened on Sunday, which is when the United States dropped those massive bunker buster bombs on the Iranian nuclear site in Fordo. Now, you spoke about that on multiple platforms, and you seem to think that yes, there was a hit, but there wasn't anything beneath Fordo of value, because probably the uranium and the centrifuges required were probably shifted out. Why do you say that?
Well, when you monitor, I don't have contacts now that would be working in the Iranian nuclear project program or be directly involved. But when you study the available satellite photographs, you can see that only 2 days before the US strike, the underground entrances to the underground facility at Fordo, for example, have been buried. That Iranians have buried them with thousands and thousands of tons of gravel and earth. This is something that takes days to do, alone this, which means that even more days before the US strike, they have already emptied this facility. Why would they empty such a facility? Because you don't leave anything useful inside. Moreover, already on 13th or 14th of June, Iranians have clearly stated that their nuclear facilities have been evacuated, which means one can deduct now that they have evacuated their stockpile of enriched uranium, at least that, which is easy to do because this is something like 400 kilograms. If you take, I don't know if you're using them in India, but in Europe we have so-called Euro pellet. 1 Euro pellet is made to carry something like 1 ton of weight, and 1 Euro pellet is something like 1 by 1 meter. So you can put such a pellet with 400 kilograms on it anywhere, almost in a bigger car, and carry it away and hide it. And it is not easy to find. So all of this is leading to the conclusion Iranians have evacuated their nuclear facilities already, at least with the onset of the Israeli airstrikes, if not even earlier. And therefore, whatever the Americans have now damaged, destroyed, nobody knows for sure, in Fordo, in Esfahan, in Natanz, is de facto irrelevant, because the stockpile of uranium enriched to 60% has disappeared. It is in Iranian hands, but nobody knows where it is. It is not within reach of Israel or the United States anymore. And this is crucial. Of course, strikes on all of these facilities have caused massive material damage to Iran, because it costs a lot to construct such underground facilities like Fordo or Natanz, less so what was hit in Esfahan. But the core product has been evacuated and is safe somewhere, hidden somewhere in Iran. And this is what matters. What another factor that matters, which is in turn in favor of Americans in Israel, is that it is very unlikely that Iranians have managed to evacuate all of their installations for enriching uraniums, because these are very complex installations, very heavy installations. So you can't just take them out and position somewhere else and everything is going to be fine. But it is very likely that they have evacuated at least a part of the installations, necessary installations, and then this in turn means they can restart their project somewhere else. So total project is probably delayed by an unknown number of months, but the grand total, they have saved their stockpile of enriched uranium and can continue to enrich if they want to do so. And that is the problem. The entire operation, Israeli operation, was launched with the objective of destroying this capability, and it failed in this regards.
Right. Finally, just a question on the day after, and we don't know when that comes. As you've said, we don't know if the war has ended right now or whether that will happen a couple of days or weeks from now. But when it eventually does, how will both sides go back to the table and reassess, and where will they work on? Are we going to see Iran double down on their missile program? Are we going to see Israel go back to its air defenses and fighter jet capabilities? What will be the major takeaways for both sides from this conflict when it finally ends?
Principal takeaway for everybody, not only for example, Iranians or Israelis or Americans, but for everybody else. I'm talking about whether it's India or Europe or China, whoever you want, is that one cannot rely on United States or Israel when negotiating with them. Why? Because while Iran was negotiating with the United States, Israel attacked Iran. And while Iran was negotiating with European powers, USA attacked Iran. So there is absolutely, from Iranian point of view, there is absolutely no interest in the United States and in Israel to negotiate seriously. That is the first point. The second point is that Israel and the West in general remains insistent on denying people who are not of the same, this is painful for me to say because I hate racism, who are not of the same skin color to be equal, to be considered equal to the Westerners. It means you as Muslims, brown people under post office, Iranians, you are prohibited from having the capability of nuclear retaliation. We have the right, we are claiming the right for ourselves, that is Israel, United States and the West, to strike you whenever we want and without you having the ability to strike back upon us. This is the next point. So then the third and perhaps most important thing about all of this is Israel is in violation of almost every kind of convention, treaty or whatever you want in power and valid, considered as valid, widely accepted around the world since 44, 45, which means UN Charter, they don't care about it. Geneva treaties about how do you fight, how do you conduct your combat operations, whom do you target, whom do you not target, null and void for them. International humanitarian law, the law of warfare, they are targeting ambulances, hospitals, they don't care. So nothing of this is valid anymore. It went so far that Trump is secretly behind the backs of nominal US allies in NATO, in Europe, is secretly negotiating with Putin. Which means all of these treaties, all of these laws of how the world functions, the entire system of law and order is null and void when it comes to Israel and when it comes to the United States. So who can depend on them anymore? For what reason? Why should anybody trust a president who is announcing ceasefires per social media while doing nothing at all in order to arrange such a ceasefire and to bring the fighting to an end? Why should one trust a prime minister who is conducting a genocide of incredible proportions, while at the same time launching aggressive wars with virtual impunity? According to UN Charter alone, this gentleman should not only be prosecuted for war crimes, but actually jailed and the key thrown away. It's not happening. The Europe, the noble, civilized West, is still discussing, oh gosh, is it really so or is it not so, and who is right and who is wrong. So all of this is null and void anymore. question is now, what of this is going to remain valid, or is there somebody capable of saying, okay, enough is enough, you are responsible for this, you are responsible for that.
Right.
Let's restore this law and order international at an international level and do something serious about punishing those who are violating this.
Right. And so you have very strong opinions on what's happening, and I believe a lot of people do share these, and we want to see the fighting end. But right now the situation is tense. There's a lot of confusion around whether there is a ceasefire, and if so, if somebody is violating it or not. We'll keep tracking the situation between Iran and Israel. But thank you so much, Mr. Cooper, for speaking to us on First Post.
Very much my pleasure. Thank you very much. All the best for you.
First Post now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
Stands at $36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor,
Hindi,
$30 trillion ka kaljo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
$4 trilhão.
Portuguese,
Por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select a language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. First Post.